This week was World Environment Day, and how better to remember our environment than being at the Singaraja forest? As we are. Singaraja is a biodiversity hotspot. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site and it's the country's last viable area of primary tropical rainforest. And this biodiversity treasure trove has 60% endemic trees to Sri Lanka and over 50% of the country's endemic species of mammals, insects and amphibians residing within. Later on in the show, Chairperson of Plant Sriyan D.S. Vijayaratna discloses why we have to look beyond species conservation and at ecosystem conservation. And we have our economic tidbits and bits and pieces to make you smile. The Petyagoda Pages is about the good news and the not so good, while a woman entrepreneur who weaves to empower women on the show. Welcome to Kaleidoscope, where we are positive, daring, different. To our wonderful partners on the show, Selico Life, CDB and The Daily Morning, thank you for all your support. If you like Kaleidoscope, subscribe and follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn.
You can now start a CDB iDeposit digital fixed deposit and experience a range of special benefits from CDB.
And here's what we have on the week that was on CDB Snapshot. Some positivity to start us off. The Sri Lankan rupee appreciates 22.9% against the US dollar during the year up to May 2023. The IMF says Sri Lanka's economy is showing tentative signs of improvement. The prices of 60 types of medicine are to be reduced, facilitating a price drop of 16%. Sri Lanka's highest acute food insecurity of 42% is in the estate sector. India's first luxury cruise ship, the Cordelia Empress, set sail to Hambantota port from Chennai this week. And Apple is finally tweaking its autocorrect function to stop correcting a certain swear word to ducking every time it's typed out.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. Srilanka Life.
This is Kaleidoscope Srilanka Life News Capsule. Welcome. We have been seeing the rupee going up 22.9% this year up to May, inflation coming down to 25.2% this May from a high of nearly 70% in October last year. Fuel and gas prices reducing too. However, exports, which we have been depending on significantly, has seen a continuous drop since the beginning of the year. Although our remittances have improved and tourism too is bringing in some funds, although not as much as expected. On the Petyagoda Pages today, scientist, conservationist and public policy advocate Rohan on what's good and what's not. Rohan, Sri Lanka has been depending on exports to prop our foreign exchange reserves. Now, that's not looking too good right now. How do you see our export conundrum?
The export fall we've seen in the first 4 months of this year, about $130 million a month, has been largely due to the garment sector. And the garment sector is having problems because of two things. The rupee is strengthening on the one hand, making the exports more expensive. And on the other, we've got a kind of near recession in many Western markets, which has reduced consumer demand. So in that situation, I think we're going to find it difficult with exports going forward. Tourism is not doing nearly as well enough as we hoped. The instability that Sri Lanka had a reputation for this time last year still seems to be lingering in the minds of potential tourists. And so I think we need to have a diversified view of this. And even though apparel exports may fall for a while, I think we need to have a backup by way of tourism and workers' remittances from overseas, which also are doing quite well now.
So do you think we need to diversify our export basket?
Yes, obviously, but I don't think you can prescribe that because there are many things that prevent that from happening. First of all, we've got to have people investing in producing things that they can export. But most people who've got capital now have invested it in government securities because they're paying so well, 25, 30% returns per year. So why would you want to risk starting a company to make something to export when you can get that return from government? So now that I think inflation is falling, just 20% now, and interest rates are on the way down, by the end of this year, we should see inflation down to 10% or thereabouts, and interest rates following in that trajectory. And then the incentive is there for people to invest their capital in actual organs of production, starting new industries and so on. The bigger problem, I think, is that the things that were working well for us, like agricultural production, are still suffering, and we haven't given enough attention to getting agricultural production back to where it was in 2020. And this is largely because of the fertilizer ban of Gotabaya Rajapaksa in mid-2021 and the agrochemicals ban. So the tea industry, for example, though prices have been buoyant, they are producing about 20% less tea than they were this time last year. That's really bad. So we need to really pay attention to production and not just exports per se.
And is there any good news in all this?
There's lots to be happy about. The central bank's reserve is now at $2.8 billion. Workers' remittances for the first 4 months of this year, $800 million more than last year. That's really good because there's more money coming in. The trade deficit is down by $1.5 billion this year. Excellent news again. And core inflation, as I've said, is down to 20% from the 60, 70% that we saw last year. So we've got a lot to be grateful for. And I suspect that Ranil Wickremesinghe is going to capitalize on this good news, print a little money, make people happy, and go in for a presidential election sooner than you think.
In our market stories this week, the Colombo Stock Exchange is continuing to struggle. The All Share Price Index fell by a further 2% this week, with high interest rates continuing to take its toll, and the average daily turnover levels remaining at below 500 million rupees. The news that Saudi Arabia was cutting its oil production levels had little effect on WTI oil prices, which remained at close to $71 per barrel. Gold held steady at just below the $2,000 per ounce level as investors awaited the US Federal Reserve's next interest rate decision. Hong Kong is about to have a quacking time with its new double duck art installation. A Dutch artist has introduced two 18-meter-tall inflatable rubber ducks to Hong Kong's waters. Z and Pang are simply adorable. Thailand has the ultimate solution for bad luck: climbing inside a coffin. Every New Year, the Thais flock to the Wat Takian Buddhist temple to lie flat in open coffins, clasping flowers and incense sticks resembling a corpse. Monks chant prayers, and once the ceremony is complete, the devotees are considered reborn and freed from bad luck. For over 120 years, the Wildlife and Nature Protection Society of Sri Lanka has led the charge to protect and preserve the country's exquisite wildlife. The newest initiative of the WNPS is Preserving Land and Nature, known as PLANT, which aims to acquire privately owned lands for the purpose of conservation in order to contribute towards creating reasonably connected corridors of protected natural spaces and also forest ecosystems. Today, current chair of PLANT and former president of the WNPS, Sriyan De Silva Vijayaratne, joins me in the studio for a chat about PLANT. Welcome, Sriyan. Good to have you on the show. Why PLANT and why now?
So sometimes, you see something and say, we should have thought of this before, but these stars need to kind of come together. So I think the time had come for PLANT. WNPS has always been an ecosystem player. We created the wildlife parks, the departments. If you go back, WNPS has always been about this big picture. And we felt that species conservation is not going to be enough. We need ecosystem conservation. But the second and more important part is that the role for private sector. If we need and want to conserve what we have, I'm afraid state sector alone cannot do this. Other countries, this is a tried and tested model. There are big players of private sector in other countries. and Sri Lanka needs to have private sector playing a big role in conservation.
What is the overarching theme of plant?
Preservation is better than reforestation. So I would say that's my answer to prevention is better than cure equivalent in conservation, because it costs too much to this thing and we have a lot to preserve. Second thing would be we are all about corridors. This is not about creating another massive Viala or a Vilpattu kind of space, but rather connecting the already protected spaces so that animals have much broader ranges to move between. And to that extent, we've picked the emerald trails on the southwest part of Sri Lanka, which is where the highest 90% of the endemics in the country live in that part, and most of you and me and the population and the development is also there, which is why corridors become critical. Third area is we see ourselves as a facilitator with partners.
Now, plant is about acquiring privately owned land. Obviously, there are going to be challenges. What are they?
I mean, the first one which comes to my mind is the archaic laws we have in the country. So we deal with lots of different challenges when we try to own land. And frankly, what we in this capacity need is somebody authorizing WNPS to be able to acquire land which fall into any of these categories, because end of the day we are acquiring it to give back to the community for conservation, not for anything else. So that's one big one. Fragmentation is a huge one, because going back to our history, all the lands got fragmented for different reasons. As a result, there are no big land parcels in the country, and especially international donors look for bigger land blocks. So combine all of that, and I would kind of venture out to say that then you have this underlying political theme which comes into these equations quite often. It just seems to weave its way into every topic. So a combination of all of these makes it a tough challenge.
So, plant was launched in 2020. How successful has it been thus far?
So our coverage is over 2,500 acres, and that in little over 2 years is way more than what we thought we could reach by this point in time. So we are quite proud about that. We also got a good partner network going. We have big local partners. The biggest land contribution came from the Haley's group. We've had places like Wharton Business School, University of Pennsylvania coming and helping us build our website. Companies like MS, we just signed up with Sparsilon earlier this week to fund some reforestation work. Then we have the international partners like Rainforest Trust and the Quick Response Fund for Nature, giants in their own field of conserving worldwide, who come and funded us. So we've got a good coalition of partners. We need more people. We are running fast, very fast, and since we are largely a volunteer-based setup so far, we need no hands on deck. And secondly, some of the capacity and the work we do requires operational expenditure now, and we had to build an institution to cater to that. We need more partners, both on funding and for bringing their resources to the party.
She's not just about weaving some of the most beautiful bags in the country. She's also about empowering the women around her to be financially independent. Charukeshi Ilapperuma is the founder of Agastya Crafts and Weaves in Kandy, and she's on Life in 60.
We offer a unique designer range at Agastya, and we also do customized designs. We have a wide product range made from eco-friendly, locally sourced sustainable material, especially water reed, pandanus, talipot, and palmyra plants. And it all actually began as a means of supporting and providing our local artisans and craftsmen making eco-friendly handcrafted products a platform to sell them. We have 14 weavers and artisans creating for Agastya, and about 99% of them are ladies. Almost all of them have been awarded the President's Award for their creations. The production process happens at the comfort of their homes while they look after their home needs, thus ensuring a sustainable livelihood for their entire family. We are focused on working with many more weavers and artisans scattered throughout Sri Lanka, mainly in the remote places, and to improvise with design inputs to add value to the final product. Also to bridge the gap between the local handcrafted products and global consumers who value them.
It's almost time for the weekend. Sit back, relax, and we'll see you next week.